Tonight, we're going to explore something that seems simple at first, but is actually one of the most incredible stories in all of science: the history of the Earth. You've probably heard bits of it in school or on TV. Scientists talk about it constantly when they explain our planet's past. But here's what most people don't realize. When you truly understand how the Earth formed, how it changed over billions of years, it completely shifts how you see the world beneath your feet. This is not just a timeline of events. It is a story so vast and full of change that it challenges what we think we know about life, nature, and even ourselves. And by the end of this journey, you're going to understand exactly why studying Earth's history matters, and why every era, every event, leaves a mark on the planet we live on today. Before we go any further, if you enjoy deep and thoughtful explorations like this, a quick like or subscribe really helps the channel grow. It's a small thing for you, but it makes a huge difference for me. Now let's begin. Billions of years ago, the solar system was a vast cloud of gas and dust, slowly spinning in the emptiness of space. This cloud, called a solar nebula, held the building blocks of planets, moons, and the sun itself. Within this quiet swirl, gravity began to pull particles together, forming small clumps that grew larger as they collided. Over time, these clumps became planetesimals, solid bodies that could gather more material through repeated impacts. Each collision added heat and energy, slowly shaping the early foundations of the planets. In this roiling disk of matter, the young Earth began to take form, a sphere of rock and metal growing in size, heavy enough that its gravity could pull in surrounding debris. As Earth grew, it remained hot. Energy from collisions, the decay of radioactive elements, and the compression of material kept the young planet molten beneath a cooling crust. Denser materials, mainly iron and nickel, sank toward the center, forming the core. Lighter, silicate minerals floated upward to create the mantle and the thin outer crust. This separation, called differentiation, gave Earth its layered structure, and it established the core as the source of the magnetic field that would one day shield life from harmful radiation. The crust was thin, constantly shifting, and fragile in comparison to the thick mantle below, which was still soft and slowly moving. Volcanoes emerged as early heat escaped to the surface, releasing gases trapped in the interior. These volcanic eruptions poured water vapor, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and other gases into the sky. The atmosphere was forming, though it was far different from the air we breathe today. Oxygen was almost non-existent. Instead, thick clouds of carbon dioxide, methane, and ammonia drifted across the glowing sky. Lightning storms sparked frequently, caused by the turbulent movement of gases and the heat of the young sun. Meteors from the surrounding space occasionally struck the surface, adding more energy and reshaping the crust. Each impact left craters and sometimes melted rock, temporarily disturbing the planet's balance, but it also delivered water and other chemicals that would later contribute to life. The surface of Earth was a harsh and molten environment. Pools of lava covered large regions, and immense oceans of magma shifted constantly. Solid rock began to form where the surface cooled, creating a primitive crust. The repeated heating and cooling caused rock to crack, allowing more gases to escape. As the atmosphere thickened, it started to trap heat, creating a greenhouse effect that kept surface temperatures high, even though the young sun was weaker than it is today. Steam rose from volcanic regions and condensed in cooler areas, slowly forming the first bodies of liquid water. The edges of these bodies were unstable, with waves of boiling water lapping against blackened rocks. carrying dissolved minerals and forming new layers of crust. Early impacts by large space objects, sometimes kilometers across, struck frequently during the first few 100 million years. Each collision delivered energy that could melt entire regions and send debris into orbit. One particularly large impact may have contributed to the formation of the Moon, sending a significant portion of Earth's crust into space, where it coalesced into a satellite. This event altered the rotation of Earth and helped stabilize its tilt, a factor that would later influence seasons and climate. While catastrophic, these impacts also brought essential elements like water, iron, and organic compounds that contributed to the chemical diversity necessary for future life. As the planet cooled further, the first solid rocks became more widespread. The crust was thin in many areas, breaking apart along lines of weakness. Volcanoes remained active, reshaping the landscape with new lava flows and releasing more gases into the growing atmosphere. Carbon dioxide levels were high, providing warmth and keeping liquid water from freezing entirely. Rain began to fall as steam condensed in the atmosphere, forming shallow ponds and small lakes. These waters gradually collected in depressions, slowly creating the earliest oceans. Minerals dissolved in these waters, forming chemical reactions that altered the surface rocks and laid the groundwork for the chemistry of life. During this time, the surface of Earth was not uniform. Some regions were covered in newly hardened basalt from volcanic eruptions, while others were soft with layers of sediments deposited in small water basins. Tectonic activity was beginning, though on a primitive scale, with pieces of crust slowly moving and colliding. Mountains, if they existed, were low and eroding quickly. Heat from the mantle created convection currents that gently nudged pieces of the crust together, setting the stage for future continents. Water collected along low points, and repeated wetting and drying cycles concentrated salts and minerals in isolated basins. The oceans were initially acidic and rich in dissolved iron, giving the water a reddish-brown hue in places where minerals were abundant. Storms and tides, driven by the gravitational pull of the young moon, circulated water across shallow basins, mixing nutrients and creating pockets of chemical diversity. Hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor released hot mineral-rich water into the colder seas, creating localized areas with high chemical activity. These vent systems provided not just heat, but also a constant supply of minerals like iron, nickel, and sulfur, forming small chemical gradients that would later support primitive biochemical reactions. Throughout the Hadean Eon, Earth was shaped by both destruction and accumulation. Large impacts could melt the crust and vaporize oceans, yet the planet steadily retained water and essential chemicals. Volcanic outgassing continually refreshed the atmosphere, maintaining a dense envelope of gases that shielded the surface from harmful space radiation. The combination of liquid water, mineral-rich rocks, and a dynamic atmosphere created an environment uniquely capable of supporting life, even if the first living systems were still hundreds of millions of years away. The young Earth was violent and unstable, yet its instability laid the foundation for everything that would come. Gravity, heat, chemistry, and pressure combined in subtle ways to set the stage for a planet that could harbor life, a world in motion, shaping itself from a spinning cloud of dust into a recognizable sphere with air, water, and the first solid crust. By the end of this early stage, Earth had transformed from a chaotic molten mass into a planet with solid crust, shallow oceans, and a thick, protective atmosphere. The core continued to generate a magnetic field, which would eventually protect the surface from the solar wind and cosmic radiation. Volcanoes persisted, shaping landforms and releasing gases that replenished the sky. Water collected in low regions, forming larger bodies that connected through primitive channels. The foundations of continents were being laid through repeated cooling, impacts, and volcanic activity. Energy from the sun and the planet's own internal heat created currents in the atmosphere and oceans, moving chemicals and heat across the surface in patterns that would persist for billions of years. As the Hadean Eon drew to a close, Earth had achieved a balance of extremes. The surface was still young, rugged, and shaped by constant upheaval. Yet it had the first stable oceans and an atmosphere thick enough to sustain chemical processes. Impacts would continue, but they became less frequent, giving the planet time to develop more complex chemistry. In these waters, in the presence of minerals and energy from heat and lightning, the first steps toward life would slowly begin. The planet's internal heat would drive tectonic shifts. The atmosphere would slowly evolve, and the surface would continue its slow transformation, preparing Earth to move from a fiery, molten beginning into a world capable of supporting living systems. Every process, from core formation to ocean development, from volcanic outgassing to meteor impacts, contributed to shaping a planet ready to host the most complex system known in the universe, life itself. As Earth cooled, water vapor in the thick, early atmosphere began to condense. Clouds formed and rains fell for long periods, collecting in low areas and forming shallow seas. These first bodies of water were not yet oceans as we know them, but pools and basins that gradually deepened and widened. Over time, they connected into larger expanses, covering much of the young planet. The water carried dissolved minerals from the rocks, creating a chemical soup that would slowly shape the surface and set the stage for life. Steam continued to rise from volcanic regions, joining the dense clouds above, feeding the rain and recycling minerals back into the crust. This cycle of evaporation and precipitation became a constant process that redistributed heat and chemical elements across the planet. The early atmosphere remained very different from what we breathe today. It was thick and heavy, dominated by nitrogen and carbon dioxide. Small amounts of methane, ammonia, and other gases floated among the clouds, giving the air a pungent chemical scent. There was almost no oxygen. Ultraviolet light from the sun interacted with the gases, causing slow chemical reactions that would eventually influence the composition of the atmosphere over millions of years. Volcanoes continued to add gases to the sky, sometimes thickening the clouds so that sunlight barely reached the surface. The interaction between the growing oceans and the atmosphere became essential, as the water absorbed carbon dioxide and other compounds, balancing temperatures and altering the chemistry of the seas. As the first seas grew, they began to shape the crust in new ways. Water flowing over the surface eroded rocks, smoothing sharp edges and carrying sediments into basins. The chemical interaction between water and minerals, called weathering, slowly transformed solid rock into clays and dissolved compounds. This process affected the composition of both the crust and the oceans. Minerals dissolved in the water, creating areas rich in elements like calcium, magnesium, and iron. These minerals settled in low points, forming early sedimentary layers that would later be preserved as rock. Tides, driven by the gravitational pull of the moon, moved water back and forth across shorelines, enhancing erosion and mixing chemicals throughout shallow seas. Impacts from space continued to influence the early Earth. Comets, rich in ice and organic compounds, collided with the surface, delivering additional water and chemicals. Asteroids struck with energy capable of melting rock and creating temporary oceans in craters. Each impact contributed to the planet's chemical diversity, adding elements that dissolved in existing bodies of water. Some impacts were catastrophic, vaporizing water and sending clouds of dust into the sky, temporarily blocking sunlight. Yet over time, these events played a constructive role, replenishing the oceans and providing raw materials for chemical reactions. The interplay between external delivery and internal recycling created a dynamic system that prepared the planet for increasingly complex chemistry. The chemistry of the oceans was active and varied. Dissolved compounds reacted with each other and with minerals from the crust. Iron, for example, combined with other elements and precipitated out of the water, sometimes forming distinct colored layers. Volcanic gases added sulfur and other reactive elements to the seas, creating gradients of chemical energy. Hydrothermal vents on the seafloor released hot, mineral-rich water that created local pockets of higher temperature and chemical activity. These areas had higher concentrations of nutrients and energy, acting as natural laboratories where simple chemical processes could become more organized. The movement of water, combined with heating from below and cooling from above, circulated compounds in ways that constantly reshaped the chemical landscape. Sunlight penetrated the shallow waters, bringing energy that could drive chemical reactions. Ultraviolet light, though harmful to modern life, played a role in splitting water molecules and triggering reactions between dissolved elements. Lightning storms above the oceans created sparks that could combine nitrogen and other gases into reactive compounds. The seas became zones of continuous chemical experimentation, where minerals, gases, and energy interacted in countless ways. The balance between inputs from the atmosphere, volcanoes, and space impacts created a stable yet dynamic system. Temperature, salinity, and acidity varied from place to place, forming a patchwork of environments with different chemical properties. The early oceans were also in contact with the growing continents. As land masses slowly appeared, streams and rivers carried minerals and sediments into the seas. The interaction between fresh water and salt water created gradients in chemistry and temperature. Shallow coastal zones accumulated thick layers of sediments rich in dissolved compounds, forming early sedimentary rocks. Chemical reactions between seawater and rocks dissolved some minerals while concentrating others. These processes were slow but persistent, slowly transforming the crust and the oceans in tandem. The combination of erosion, deposition, and chemical reactions created a dynamic interface between land and sea that would continue to shape Earth for billions of years. Gas exchange between the oceans and atmosphere was crucial in stabilizing the environment. Carbon dioxide dissolved in water reduced the greenhouse effect, helping to regulate temperatures. Nitrogen remained mostly in the air, creating a steady background composition. Trace gases from volcanoes, such as sulfur compounds, influenced acidity in the water, affecting mineral formation. The cycling of these gases between water and air created feedback systems that maintained chemical balance. Over time, these processes contributed to the formation of carbonate rocks, which captured carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and locked it into the crust. The oceans acted as buffers, smoothing extremes and maintaining conditions suitable for more complex chemistry. The repeated rainfall and runoff reshaped the planet's surface. Basins deepened, channels formed, and shallow seas expanded. Evaporation in warmer regions concentrated salts, forming small brines that were chemically distinct from the larger oceans. Minerals precipitated in layers, creating early evidence of chemical stratification. These layers would later serve as records of ancient conditions, preserving the story of Earth's first oceans. Water movement was gentle in some areas, violent in others, creating currents that mixed nutrients and minerals over great distances. The balance between calm zones and turbulent flows allowed different chemical processes to dominate in different regions, promoting diversity in the developing environment. By the end of this stage, Earth had a stable system of oceans and atmosphere interacting continuously. Water covered much of the surface, shaped by rainfall, rivers, and tides. The atmosphere remained thick and chemically active, influenced by volcanic activity and external impacts. The interaction between air, water, and crust created gradients of temperature, chemistry, and energy that would be critical for future life. Minerals, salts, and gases cycled between the land, sea, and sky in a continuous exchange. Earth was no longer simply a molten rock. It had become a complex dynamic planet with a liquid surface, a protective atmosphere, and an environment ready for chemical evolution. By the time the oceans had formed and the atmosphere began to stabilize, Earth had created the conditions necessary for life to emerge. The waters were rich with dissolved minerals, and shallow coastal zones received a constant supply of chemicals from rainfall, rivers, and volcanic activity. In some regions, sediment layers preserved patterns that would later become evidence of the earliest life forms. Stromatolites, layered structures built by microbial mats, appeared in shallow waters. These formations, composed of trapped sediments and microbial secretions, provide the oldest records of living activity. Each layer captured the interaction between simple organisms and their environment, preserving a slow but continuous history of life at the microscopic scale. Life did not appear suddenly, but began as simple chemical systems capable of storing information and catalyzing reactions. RNA molecules, able to replicate themselves under the right conditions, likely played a central role. These molecules acted both as carriers of information and as catalysts, bridging the gap between chemistry and biology. Tiny vesicles, formed from lipid molecules, created primitive membranes that separated internal chemical reactions from the surrounding water. These structures were the first protocells, small compartments in which molecules could interact efficiently. Over time, these simple cells became more organized, developing pathways to harness energy and maintain chemical balance, forming the basis of metabolism. Energy for early life came from a variety of sources. Sunlight penetrated shallow waters, driving simple photochemical reactions. However, in deeper regions, life relied on chemical energy. Hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor released hot, mineral-rich water into the surrounding seas. These vents contained compounds like hydrogen, sulfide, and iron, which could be used to drive chemical reactions. Organisms living near vents could convert these chemicals into energy through chemosynthesis, a process that did not require sunlight. These early metabolic pathways were simple but efficient, allowing life to grow in pockets across the oceans, exploiting the chemical diversity provided by the dynamic environment. Volcanic activity influenced the distribution and chemistry of these early habitats. Lava flows reshaped coastlines and formed islands, while gases released from eruptions altered the chemistry of the surrounding water. The combination of heat, minerals, and chemical gradients created numerous microenvironments where life could emerge and evolve. Hot springs, shallow lagoons, and hydrothermal regions each offered different energy sources and chemical conditions. Life forms capable of taking advantage of these environments multiplied, producing localized blooms of microbial communities. Their activity began to alter the chemistry of the oceans, laying down minerals and influencing the balance of gases in the atmosphere above. The early biosphere, though microscopic, began to have measurable effects on geochemical cycles. Microbes absorb dissolved compounds such as carbon, nitrogen, and sulfur, processing them into different chemical forms. Some microbes precipitated minerals directly, contributing to the formation of stromatolites and other sedimentary structures. Through respiration and metabolism, they influenced the concentration of gases in the water, creating gradients that affected other chemical reactions. The slow accumulation of these effects over millions of years altered the composition of seawater and sediments, preparing the environment for increasingly complex life. Even at this stage, life was both a product of its environment and an agent of change. Stromatolites offer a visible record of these early interactions. Their layered structure shows the constant growth of microbial mats, the trapping of sediments, and the deposition of minerals. Each layer represents a cycle of biological and chemical activity, a testament to life's persistence in the face of a changing environment. Fossils of stromatolites, preserved in rocks as old as 3.5 billion years, demonstrate that these microbial communities were widespread. They thrived in shallow seas, where sunlight and minerals were abundant, and their presence indicates that the first ecosystems were organized, even if only at a microscopic level. As life became established, it influenced the chemical cycling of key elements. Microbes fixed carbon, drawing it from carbon dioxide dissolved in the water. Some converted nitrogen compounds into usable forms, while others processed sulfur and iron. These cycles gradually stabilized aspects of the environment, creating feedback loops between life and the chemistry of the planet. Hydrothermal regions continued to provide energy and nutrients, supporting the expansion of microbial communities. Even small variations in temperature, chemical concentration, and mineral availability created diverse habitats, allowing life to adapt and persist under a variety of conditions. Over time, protocells evolved more sophisticated mechanisms to maintain internal balance. Membranes became more selective, controlling the movement of ions and molecules. Enzymatic reactions became more efficient, allowing cells to process nutrients and energy with increasing precision. Early metabolic pathways, though simple, established patterns that would later be elaborated in more complex organisms. The interplay between energy sources, chemical reactions, and compartmentalization laid the foundation for genetic systems, creating a bridge from chemistry to biology that would allow life to endure for billions of years. Life's presence slowly transformed the oceans. Metabolic activity altered the concentration of dissolved minerals, influenced pH levels, and affected the availability of nutrients. Sedimentary deposits reflected these changes, preserving chemical signatures that scientists can read billions of years later. Microbial mats stabilize sediments, reducing erosion in localized areas and creating structured layers of mineral accumulation. By participating in these processes, early life actively shaped the environment, influencing which chemical pathways would dominate and which elements would become available for later biological systems. In essence, life and Earth co-evolved, each influencing the development of the other. Even before photosynthesis, life found ways to harness energy efficiently. Chemosynthesis dominated in regions with abundant chemical energy, while sunlight-powered reactions occurred in shallow waters. Microbes formed communities that took advantage of gradients in temperature, mineral concentration, and light intensity. These gradients created niches that allowed multiple types of early organisms to coexist. The distribution of these communities was not random but structured by the availability of energy and nutrients, as well as by physical factors such as water currents, tides, and the location of hydrothermal vents. Life was becoming organized on a planetary scale, even if still microscopic. By 3.5 billion years ago, Earth supported a stable biosphere of microscopic organisms. The oceans were alive with microbial communities that covered shallow shelves and thrived around hydrothermal vents. Chemical cycles driven by these organisms began to regulate aspects of the atmosphere and seawater, setting the stage for future innovations such as photosynthesis. Sedimentary layers preserved in rocks record this early activity, providing evidence of life's persistence and adaptability. These processes established a planet in which life was no longer a passive participant, but an active agent in shaping the environment, creating a feedback loop that would continue for billions of years. The combination of chemical energy, mineral-rich environments, and stable water bodies allowed life to experiment with new forms and processes. RNA-based systems continued to replicate and evolve, improving their efficiency and stability. Protocells multiplied and diversified, exploring the chemical landscape. Hydrothermal regions, shallow seas, and coastal lagoons provided varied conditions that encouraged experimentation and adaptation. Each microenvironment became a testing ground for new metabolic pathways, gradually increasing the complexity of life. Over millions of years, these small, simple systems laid the foundation for the evolution of more complex cells, marking the beginning of a continuous biological presence on Earth. By the end of this early stage, life had established itself as a persistent planet-wide phenomenon. Microbial mats built structures that would survive for billions of years. Chemical cycles began to stabilize key elements, and the oceans became active arenas of metabolism. Life's influence on the environment was subtle but continuous, gradually transforming the chemistry of the oceans and the atmosphere. Earth was no longer simply a physical and chemical system. It had become a biological world, one in which life and planet were inseparably linked. The earliest steps toward biology had been taken, and the stage was set for future transformations that would eventually lead to oxygenation, multicellular organisms, and the diversification of life in ways that no other planet in the solar system could match. Around 2.4 billion years ago, Earth experienced a profound transformation known as the Great Oxidation Event. For the first time, oxygen began to accumulate in the atmosphere on a large scale, changing the chemistry of the planet forever. This oxygen did not appear suddenly, but grew steadily over millions of years as certain microbes learned to harness energy from sunlight. Cyanobacteria, a type of photosynthetic bacteria, became widespread in shallow oceans. They absorbed carbon dioxide and water and, through the process of photosynthesis, released oxygen as a byproduct. In doing so, they slowly altered the balance of gases in the atmosphere and the oceans, making Earth's surface increasingly rich in oxygen. Before this event, life had thrived in environments without oxygen. Most organisms were anaerobic, relying on chemical reactions that did not require oxygen for energy. The emergence of oxygen introduced a new challenge. Even small concentrations were toxic to many existing microbes, creating selective pressures that eliminated some species while allowing others to adapt. Anaerobic ecosystems shrank in areas where oxygen spread, and new ecological niches appeared for organisms capable of tolerating or using oxygen. This transition marked a turning point in Earth's biosphere, where life began to interact with the environment in ways that reshaped the planet itself. The rise of oxygen had a profound effect on the chemistry of the oceans. Iron, abundant in seawater, reacted with oxygen to form iron oxide, which precipitated and settled to the ocean floor. These deposits created the banded iron formations that today provide evidence of the Great Oxidation event. Layers of iron-rich minerals alternated with bands of silica and other sediments, recording the slow but persistent interaction between oxygen-producing organisms and the mineral content of the seas. Each layer is a snapshot of changing oxygen levels, showing periods when oxygen was absorbed by iron before reaching the atmosphere, followed by intervals when oxygen accumulation continued. These formations are among the most important records of early Earth's environmental change. The spread of oxygen was uneven and slow. In some regions, shallow coastal waters and continental shelves saw the earliest effects, where cyanobacteria were most abundant. Deeper waters and isolated basins remained low in oxygen for long periods. The interaction between oxygen and dissolved compounds produced chemical gradients, creating varied habitats. These gradients were crucial for life to adapt and diversify. Microbes capable of using oxygen for respiration gained a new, highly efficient way to extract energy from organic molecules. This allowed some organisms to grow larger, divide more rapidly, and exploit environments that were previously inhospitable. Life was beginning to take advantage of the chemical changes it had helped create. Volcanic activity continued to influence the distribution of oxygen. Gases released from eruptions, including carbon dioxide, methane, and sulfur compounds, interacted with the increasing oxygen, sometimes neutralizing its effects locally or contributing to further chemical reactions. These interactions slowed the spread of oxygen in some areas, while in other regions, the continuous activity of cyanobacteria overcame the effects of volcanic gases. The competition between oxygen production and chemical consumption in the oceans created a dynamic system where oxygen levels fluctuated but increased overall. Over millions of years, this process gradually raised the atmospheric oxygen content to a level that could sustain new forms of life. Geochemical evidence preserved in rock strata provides insight into this period. Banded iron formations, as well as changes in sulfur isotopes, indicate the progressive rise of oxygen. Rocks from this era show that oxygen was first absorbed by iron and other minerals, preventing immediate accumulation in the atmosphere. As these sinks filled, oxygen began to escape into the air, creating a new atmosphere capable of supporting aerobic life. These rock records also show the decline of certain minerals that were stable only in the absence of oxygen. The stratified layers of sediment, preserved over billions of years, serve as a timeline of Earth's slow transformation into an oxygen-rich world. The consequences for life were profound. Anaerobic microbes that could not tolerate oxygen faced extinction in many environments. Others adapted by developing mechanisms to detoxify oxygen or by moving into oxygen-poor niches. At the same time, aerobic organisms emerged, exploiting oxygen to extract more energy from organic matter. This metabolic innovation allowed cells to grow more complex, divide more efficiently, and sustain higher activity levels. Oxygen became both a challenge and an opportunity, driving evolution in directions previously impossible. The Great Oxidation event set the stage for future biological innovations, including the eventual emergence of eukaryotic cells. Oxygen also changed Earth's surface chemistry. Minerals that formed under low oxygen conditions began to alter, and new compounds stabilized in the presence of oxygen. Sedimentary rocks recorded these changes, capturing the interactions between biology and geology. Iron-rich layers alternated with silica deposits, while sulfur compounds became oxidized and precipitated as sulfates. These patterns show that life and Earth's chemistry were now inseparable, with microbial activity directly influencing the composition of the oceans and atmosphere. The accumulation of oxygen marked the first time that life had permanently altered planetary conditions on a global scale. Over time, the atmosphere reached a state where oxygen could persist in the air for long periods. Cyanobacteria continued to produce oxygen, while chemical sinks like iron and sulfur gradually became saturated. This slow accumulation paved the way for more complex ecosystems and enabled the development of protective ozone layers in the atmosphere. The presence of ozone reduced harmful ultraviolet radiation, allowing life to expand into new environments. The interplay of biology, chemistry, and planetary processes during this era created a feedback loop that stabilized oxygen levels and prepared Earth for the next stages of evolution. The Great Oxidation event represents a critical juncture in Earth's history. It transformed the chemical environment of the oceans, altered the atmosphere, and reshaped the biosphere. Microbial life became both a driver and a responder to environmental change. Cyanobacteria harnessed sunlight to produce oxygen, which in turn created new chemical conditions, challenged existing life, and opened the door for future evolutionary innovations. Banded iron formations, isotopic signatures, and sedimentary layers preserve this story, showing how a microscopic process had planetary consequences. By fundamentally altering the balance of gases, Earth became a world capable of supporting complex life. By the end of this period, oxygen was a permanent feature of the atmosphere. Anaerobic life persisted in isolated, oxygen-poor environments, but the majority of ecosystems were beginning to experience oxygen's influence. The oceans, previously rich in dissolved iron and other reactive compounds, now contained layers of oxidized minerals, recording the gradual transformation. Cyanobacteria continued to flourish, stabilizing oxygen levels and producing energy through photosynthesis. The planet's chemistry, life systems, and surface processes were now intertwined in ways that would define Earth's trajectory for billions of years, setting the stage for future events that would lead to even greater biological and environmental complexity. Hundreds of millions of years after oxygen began to accumulate, Earth underwent periods of extreme cold, known as Snowball Earth episodes. Geological evidence shows that glaciers once reached near the equator, covering much of the planet in ice. Rocks from this time contain striations, scratches, and deposits left by moving ice, confirming that glaciers were widespread. Layered sediments rich in dropstones carried by melting ice appear in regions far from modern poles. These records indicate that for long periods, Earth's surface was almost entirely frozen, with ice sheets stretching across continents and oceans alike. Evidence of repeated cycles suggests that Snowball Earth events occurred more than once, separated by millions of years of milder climate. The causes of these glaciations were complex. The Sun, at this time, emitted slightly less energy than it does today, reducing the heat reaching the surface. High levels of oxygen and low greenhouse gases may have contributed to cooler temperatures, as carbon dioxide was removed from the atmosphere by chemical weathering and absorption into the oceans. Continental arrangements also played a role. Large land masses located near the equator enhanced rock weathering, drawing down carbon dioxide and reducing atmospheric warmth. Tectonic movements shifted continents over millions of years, influencing ocean currents, heat distribution, and the balance of greenhouse gases. These factors combined to create conditions where ice could expand from the poles toward the equator, eventually covering most of the planet. During these harsh glaciations, life faced extreme challenges. Shallow seas and coastal areas froze over, and surface waters became less hospitable. Yet life endured in refuges. Hydrothermal vents on the ocean floor remained warm, providing energy and minerals for microbes. Areas under thinner ice or near volcanic regions offered pockets where liquid water persisted. Microbial life adapted to these extreme conditions, relying on chemical energy or surviving in low-light environments beneath ice sheets. The resilience of these early organisms ensured that, despite near-global freezing, life continued and remained capable of recolonizing the oceans when conditions improved. When ice sheets eventually retreated, the post-glacial environment offered new opportunities for life. Retreating glaciers released nutrients trapped in rocks and sediments, enriching oceans and shallow seas. Increased sunlight, warmer temperatures, and abundant minerals created ideal conditions for biological growth. Microbial communities flourished, and new forms of life took advantage of the newly available ecological niches. This burst of biodiversity, sometimes called a rebound effect, led to rapid changes in ecosystems, setting the stage for evolutionary experimentation. In this way, snowball Earth events, though destructive, indirectly promoted biological innovation and increased complexity in surviving organisms. The icy conditions also shaped the planet physically. Expansive glaciers scoured the crust, carving valleys and leveling high points. As ice advanced and retreated, it moved large quantities of sediment, redistributing rock and minerals across continents. Coastal regions were reshaped, and inland areas experienced erosion and deposition on a massive scale. The repeated expansion and contraction of ice sheets left a lasting imprint on Earth's topography, influencing the development of rivers, lakes, and basins. These processes also affected the flow of water and sediments into the oceans, which in turn influenced nutrient availability for marine life. The physical legacy of Snowball Earth would endure for hundreds of millions of years. Ocean currents were influenced by the presence and retreat of ice. Large ice sheets altered the distribution of heat across the planet, affecting the movement of water and nutrients. As ice melted, freshwater input into the oceans changed salinity patterns, driving currents and mixing layers of seawater. These shifts had profound effects on climate and the distribution of nutrients, creating localized zones of productivity and chemical activity. Marine organisms that survived under ice or in refuges experienced new conditions as currents redistributed food and energy. The dynamic interplay between ice coverage, ocean circulation, and chemical availability created opportunities for life to explore new habitats and develop greater complexity. Evidence for Snowball Earth comes from many types of rocks. Glacial deposits, including tillites and striated bedrock, indicate the widespread movement of ice. Dropstones, embedded in layers of fine sediment, reveal that glaciers transported and dropped rocks far from their origin. Isotopic analysis of carbon and oxygen in these layers shows significant changes in temperature and chemical composition, reflecting the global cooling events. Rocks deposited immediately after glaciations often show rapid weathering and shifts in sediment composition, providing further evidence of environmental upheaval followed by recovery. Together, these geological signatures document a planet that experienced extreme and repeated glaciation. Life during these events did not just survive, but adapted in remarkable ways. Microbes developed tolerance to freezing temperatures, low light, and limited nutrients. Some organisms may have entered dormant states, awaiting more favorable conditions. Others exploited hydrothermal vent systems, where mineral-rich fluids, supported chemosynthetic communities. The selective pressures of a nearly frozen world promoted the evolution of strategies to endure extremes, including mechanisms to protect DNA, maintain metabolism at low temperatures, and exploit new chemical gradients. These adaptations would influence future life forms, contributing to the resilience and diversity of the biosphere. When glacial periods ended, the sudden availability of liquid water and nutrients stimulated rapid ecological expansion. Coastal and shallow marine environments filled with life, and the chemical composition of oceans shifted as ice released trapped minerals. Benthic zones, previously covered by ice or frozen sediments, became available for colonization. Microbial mats re-established themselves, and metabolic diversity increased. The combination of warmth, nutrient enrichment, and chemical diversity created opportunities for new metabolic pathways to emerge. These post-glacial periods were critical for shaping the trajectory of life, preparing ecosystems for later innovations and the eventual emergence of multicellular organisms. The impact of Snowball Earth on continents extended beyond erosion and deposition. Ice movement created structural weaknesses in the crust, influencing subsequent tectonic activity. Basins formed where ice scoured the land, later filled by sediments and water. Mountain ranges were subtly reshaped by glacial grinding and melting. The redistribution of mass from ice sheets influenced sea levels and crustal stress, subtly affecting plate movement. Over millions of years, these glacial processes contributed to the arrangement of continents and the development of ocean basins, which in turn influenced climate patterns and the distribution of ecosystems. Despite the severity of these glaciations, life demonstrated remarkable persistence. Hydrothermal vent communities remained active. Shallow refuges provided habitat for photosynthetic organisms, and microbial diversity continued to expand. The repeated cycles of freezing and thawing created a rhythm of destruction and renewal that shaped evolution. Organisms that survived these episodes carried forward adaptations that allowed them to cope with environmental stress, laying the groundwork for greater resilience. The dynamic interplay of ice, water, minerals, and life produced a planet that was harsh, yet capable of recovery, fostering complexity and diversity in the aftermath of extreme conditions. By the end of the Snowball Earth episodes, Earth had experienced some of the most extreme climate events in its history. Ice sheets receded, oceans warmed, and nutrients released from eroded rock fueled bursts of life. Sedimentary deposits recorded the advance and retreat of glaciers, preserving evidence of a planet in transformation. Ocean currents and salinity patterns were reshaped, influencing future climate and ecology. Life had endured, adapted, and emerged more robust, demonstrating the resilience of biological systems in the face of planetary extremes. These episodes left a lasting imprint on Earth's surface, climate, and biosphere, shaping conditions for future evolutionary milestones. Around 541 million years ago, Earth entered a period of rapid biological change known as the Cambrian Explosion. For the first time, life expanded from simple microbial and multicellular forms into a vast diversity of complex organisms. Within a relatively short span of geological time, most of the major animal groups known today appeared in the fossil record. Oceans teemed with new life forms, displaying a range of body plans, feeding strategies, and behaviors that had never existed before. This explosion of complexity marked a major turning point in Earth's history, transforming ecosystems and establishing the foundations of modern life. Shallow seas played a crucial role in this transformation. Continental shelves provided extensive areas of warm, well-lit water where nutrients could accumulate. These environments allowed organisms to thrive and interact in new ways. Sunlight penetrated the water, supporting photosynthetic algae that form the base of complex food chains. As multicellular animals evolved, they began to exploit different layers of the water column and the sea floor, creating diverse habitats. Shallow seas acted as nurseries for innovation, enabling species to experiment with size, shape, and mobility in ways that deeper or darker waters did not allow. Fossil sites such as the Burgess Shale in Canada and the Chengjiang deposits in China provide remarkable evidence of this period. These sites preserve the soft bodies of animals that rarely fossilize, offering a detailed view of Cambrian ecosystems. Fossils reveal sponges, worms, early arthropods, and other creatures with hard shells, jointed appendages, or segmented bodies. Many organisms show features adapted for movement, feeding, or defense, demonstrating a rapid evolution of anatomical diversity. The variety captured in these fossil beds illustrates the sudden emergence of complex ecosystems where predator and prey interacted in ways previously unseen. Oxygen levels in the oceans and atmosphere had risen significantly since earlier periods, contributing to this diversification. Higher oxygen allowed animals to sustain more energy-intensive metabolisms and to grow larger bodies. Genetic innovations, including regulatory genes that controlled body plans and developmental processes, enabled organisms to produce new forms more rapidly. Small changes in DNA could produce limbs, segments, or specialized tissues, allowing animals to explore new ecological roles. Environmental pressures and the availability of oxygen together created a fertile ground for experimentation, where evolutionary innovations could spread quickly through populations. Predator-prey dynamics became a powerful driver of evolution during the Cambrian Explosion. The appearance of predators with hard shells, claws, or teeth created selective pressure on other species to develop defenses. Armor, spines, burrowing behavior, and rapid movement emerged as adaptations to avoid predation. This arms race between predators and prey accelerated evolutionary change, producing more complex interactions within ecosystems. The ecological landscape shifted from simple competition for nutrients to intricate networks of feeding relationships, signaling the emergence of structured food webs. The appearance of mineralized skeletons and shells had multiple advantages. Hard structures provided protection against predation and physical stress, while also leaving a more complete fossil record for modern scientists to study. Skeletons allowed organisms to support larger bodies and stronger muscles, enabling more active movement and complex behavior. The development of exoskeletons in arthropods, for example, permitted new modes of locomotion and feeding. Calcium carbonate and other minerals extracted from seawater formed the basis of these protective structures, linking ocean chemistry directly to biological evolution. Diversity in body plans increased rapidly. Segmentation, bilateral symmetry, and specialized appendages allowed organisms to exploit distinct ecological niches. Filter, feeders, grazers, burrowers, and active hunters coexisted in the same shallow seas. Some animals developed sensory organs, such as eyes, to detect prey or predators. Others evolved appendages for grasping, crawling, or swimming. This variety illustrates how evolutionary pressure, environmental opportunity, and genetic innovation combined to produce an unprecedented expansion of form and function within the oceans. Interactions among species became increasingly complex. Grazers altered the distribution of algae and microbial mats, affecting sediment deposition. Burrowing animals reshaped seafloor sediments, enhancing oxygen penetration and influencing chemical cycles. predatory activity redistributed nutrients and influenced population dynamics, ecosystems became integrated systems with feedback loops between organisms and their environment. Cambrian seas were not static habitats, but dynamic networks where life and Earth shaped each other continuously, setting patterns that would persist in later eras. Fossil evidence also reveals surprising experimentation with life strategies. Some organisms combined features in novel ways, such as early arthropods with flexible segments and compound eyes, or worms with hard plates and burrowing adaptations. This experimental diversity suggests that evolution operated rapidly, exploring many solutions to environmental challenges. While some forms became extinct quickly, others persisted and gave rise to lineages that would continue into the Ordovician and beyond. The fossil record shows a mixture of successful and failed innovations, documenting the trial and error nature of evolution at this time. By the end of the Cambrian Explosion, Earth's oceans were filled with complex, interacting communities. Organisms occupied various ecological niches, from the sea floor to open water, each adapted to the challenges of predation, feeding, and movement. Shallow seas teemed with diverse life forms, and the relationships between organisms created the first extensive food webs. The combined effects of oxygenation, genetic innovation, environmental opportunity, and ecological pressure transformed simple multicellular life into an intricate, vibrant biosphere. The Cambrian Explosion represents a dramatic leap in complexity, a moment when Earth's biological landscape fundamentally changed and set the stage for future evolutionary milestones. Over hundreds of millions of years, Earth's landmasses continued to shift and reshape through the slow, relentless movement of tectonic plates. One of the earliest large supercontinents, Rodinia, began to break apart roughly 750 million years ago. Its fragmentation set in motion a series of tectonic events that would redefine the arrangement of continents and oceans. Pieces of Rodinia drifted slowly across the globe, colliding, rotating, and separating, influenced by forces deep within Earth's mantle. These movements created the conditions for the temporary assembly of Pannotia, a short-lived supercontinent that formed near the end of the Precambrian. Pannotia, although unstable and transient, marked an important stage in the long-term evolution of continental arrangements. As tectonic plates continued their migration, new supercontinents emerged. Gondwana, a massive landmass in the southern hemisphere, coalesced from smaller continents and fragments. In the northern hemisphere, smaller landmasses eventually joined to form Laurasia. These continental assemblies were not static. They slowly drifted, collided, and deformed over millions of years. The collisions created vast mountain ranges, where rock layers were compressed, folded, and uplifted. Volcanoes erupted along tectonic boundaries, adding new crust and reshaping regional topography. Earth's surface became a patchwork of rising mountains, deep basins, and active volcanic zones, all sculpted by the invisible but powerful forces of plate tectonics. Mountain building, or orogeny, had lasting effects on landscapes and ecosystems. As mountains rose, weathering and erosion began to wear them down, producing sediment that rivers carried into the oceans. This sediment enriched shallow seas with minerals, supporting marine life and influencing chemical cycles. Valleys formed between ranges, lakes filled low-lying areas, and coastal plains developed along newly exposed shorelines. The cycle of uplift and erosion created dynamic habitats both on land and in adjacent seas, fostering biodiversity. Over time, mountains influenced climate patterns by diverting winds, creating rain shadows, and affecting local temperatures, illustrating the deep connection between geology and environment. The arrangement of continents had a direct impact on ocean circulation. As land masses shifted, ocean basins changed shape, altering the flow of currents that distribute heat and nutrients. Narrow seaways restricted water movement in some regions, while broad continental shelves promoted mixing in others. These changes influenced global climate by affecting how heat was transported from the equator to the poles. The position of continents near the tropics or poles also determined the formation of glaciers, rainfall patterns, and temperature gradients. Ocean currents, in turn, affected nutrient availability in the seas, influencing the distribution and evolution of marine life. Continents and oceans were connected through complex interactions that shaped the environment on a planetary scale. The shifting positions of continents also guided the distribution of life. Coastal habitats expanded or contracted as shorelines moved, while mountain ranges created barriers that isolated populations. Organisms adapted to changing conditions, developing new traits to survive in diverse environments. The formation of Gondwana and Laurasia created separate land areas where species evolved independently, leading to geographic differentiation. Isolated ecosystems in shallow seas or on emerging landmasses provided opportunities for evolutionary experimentation. Over millions of years, these processes contributed to the diversification of life, both on land and in the oceans, shaping patterns of biodiversity that would persist into later eras. Erosion and sedimentation linked tectonics to chemistry and biology. Rivers carried minerals from upland regions to coastal waters, where they mixed with seawater and supported early marine ecosystems. Sediment deposition built deltas and shallow shelves, creating new habitats for benthic organisms. These processes also influenced carbon cycling, as organic material was buried in sediments and minerals reacted with seawater. The continuous redistribution of rock and sediment linked geological activity to the living world, showing that tectonics and erosion were not just physical processes, but also drivers of ecological and chemical change. Supercontinent cycles affected climate over long timescales. When continents clustered near the equator, warm conditions dominated, and ocean currents distributed heat efficiently. When land masses gathered near the poles, ice formation and glaciation became more likely. The positions of continents controlled patterns of rainfall, wind, and temperature, influencing where glaciers could expand and retreat. These shifts created alternating periods of icehouse and greenhouse conditions, shaping the environmental pressures under which life evolved. The movement of continents thus played a central role in Earth's climate history, affecting both long-term trends and regional conditions. Tectonic activity created isolated basins and inland seas that became centers of unique ecological development. As plates collided, depressions formed where water collected, forming lakes and inland seas with distinct chemical conditions. Life in these isolated environments evolved along separate paths, developing unique adaptations. Shallow marine shelves around drifting continents also supported diverse ecosystems, influenced by the influx of sediments and nutrients from erosion. The interplay of continental position, ocean circulation, and habitat isolation created complex patterns of distribution that shaped evolution on multiple scales, from local populations to entire ocean basins. Volcanism associated with tectonic movements added further complexity. Lava flows and ash deposits enrich soils with nutrients, providing fertile ground for early plant colonization and microbial communities. Volcanic gases contributed to atmospheric chemistry, affecting temperatures and weather patterns. The repeated cycle of mountain building, erosion, and volcanism produced a dynamic surface where landscapes were constantly renewed. These processes shaped ecosystems both directly by providing habitats and indirectly by influencing climate, nutrient distribution, and ocean chemistry. Life and geology were intertwined, responding to each other in an ongoing feedback loop. By the end of this period, the modern arrangement of continents had begun to take shape. Large land masses, such as Gondwana and Laurasia, dominated Earth's surface, while smaller continents and microcontinents occupied the spaces between. Mountain ranges defined landscapes, coastlines were reshaped, and ocean basins directed currents that influenced global climate. The combination of tectonics, erosion, sedimentation, and volcanism created a dynamic world where land, sea, and life interacted continuously. Continental drift set the stage for future ecological opportunities, influencing the evolution and spread of species across both marine and terrestrial environments. The connection between geology and biology became increasingly apparent. Continental positions determined the distribution of habitats, while tectonic activity provided both challenges and opportunities for adaptation. The shifting continents altered climate, ocean circulation, and nutrient availability, influencing the evolutionary pressures faced by organisms. Life responded to these changes, evolving traits suited to new landscapes and waters. The slow but persistent movement of Earth's crust demonstrated that planetary-scale processes shaped the environment in which life flourished, creating the foundation for the diverse ecosystems that would continue to evolve over hundreds of millions of years. About 250 million years ago, Earth entered the Mesozoic era, a time that would come to be known as the Age of Dinosaurs. This era is divided into three main periods: the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous. Each period had its own distinct environments and life forms, but together they represent a long chapter in which dinosaurs dominated terrestrial ecosystems. Small reptiles had survived the Permian-Triassic extinction, and from these survivors, dinosaurs began to diversify into many forms, occupying a range of ecological niches from swift predators to massive herbivores. During the Triassic, early dinosaurs were relatively small, but as the Jurassic period progressed, they evolved into larger, more specialized forms. Dinosaurs became the dominant terrestrial vertebrates, but they were not the only animals sharing these environments. Early mammals, small and mostly nocturnal, lived alongside dinosaurs in the shadows of giant predators and the herbivores. These mammals were primarily insectivores and omnivores, maintaining low profiles while experimenting with new ecological strategies. Birds also appeared during this era, evolving from small theropod dinosaurs. Feathered forms diversified slowly, initially serving for insulation and display, and later enabling flight. This coexistence of dinosaurs, mammals, and early birds reflects the complex ecosystems that had developed during the Mesozoic. Continental drift continued to shape climate and ecology. By the early Mesozoic, the supercontinent Pangaea had begun to break apart, creating vast coastlines and isolated landmasses. Ocean circulation changed as new seaways opened, redistributing heat and moisture across the globe. The arrangement of continents created climate zones, from tropical regions near the equator to more temperate areas toward the poles. These zones influence plant growth and the distribution of animals, creating diverse habitats for terrestrial and marine life. Mountains and inland seas further divided ecosystems, contributing to evolutionary diversification by isolating populations and creating unique environmental pressures. Flora during the Mesozoic was dominated by gymnosperms, including conifers, cycads, and ginkgos. Forests of tall conifers provided shelter and food for herbivorous dinosaurs, while cycads offered low-growing foliage. Plants evolved to cope with changing climates and soil conditions, producing adaptations that allowed them to thrive in dry or seasonal environments. Late in the Cretaceous, flowering plants, or angiosperms, began to appear, gradually transforming landscapes. Flowers provided new food sources, such as nectar and fruit, supporting insects and other animals. The rise of angiosperms marked a major shift in terrestrial ecosystems, influencing herbivore diets, pollinator behavior, and the evolution of complex plant-animal interactions. Dinosaurs exhibited remarkable diversity in form and behavior. Predators range from agile hunters that chase prey on land to larger apex carnivores with powerful jaws and claws. Herbivores evolved features such as long necks to reach high foliage, armor for protection, and specialized teeth for grinding plant material. Some species developed complex social behavior, including herding and nest building. The interactions between predators and prey created dynamic ecosystems, where the balance of populations was continually adjusted by competition, predation, and resource availability. These Mesozoic communities were complex and interconnected, reflecting a long period of evolutionary experimentation. Marine ecosystems also flourished during the Mesozoic. Oceans were home to reptiles such as ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and mosasaurs, as well as early sharks, bony fishes, and ammonites. Coral reefs expanded in shallow seas, supporting diverse invertebrate communities. Marine food webs grew increasingly complex, with large predators, filter feeders, and plankton interacting in layered ecosystems. Changes in ocean circulation, influenced by continental drift, altered the distribution of nutrients and temperature, driving adaptation among marine species. The Mesozoic oceans were vibrant and dynamic, reflecting the interplay of geology, climate, and life. Volcanic activity continued to influence climate and habitats. Lava flows and eruptions released gases that warmed or cooled local and global environments. Periods of volcanic activity altered atmospheric composition, affecting temperature, rainfall, and plant growth. These changes sometimes stressed ecosystems, leading to evolutionary pressures that shaped life over time. In combination with shifting continents, volcanic activity created heterogeneous environments, promoting both extinction and diversification. Organisms adapted to survive these fluctuations, demonstrating resilience and flexibility across millions of years. Mass extinction events punctuated the Mesozoic, periodically reshaping life on Earth. While the Triassic-Jurassic extinction allowed dinosaurs to rise to dominance, the end Cretaceous extinction, caused by a combination of asteroid impact, volcanic activity, and climate changes, marked the sudden end of most non-avian dinosaurs. These events cleared ecological space, enabling surviving groups such as mammals, birds, and flowering plants to diversify in the Paleogene. Fossil evidence shows abrupt changes in species composition, with some lineages disappearing and others emerging in the aftermath. Extinctions were both destructive and transformative, setting the stage for new evolutionary trajectories. In terrestrial ecosystems, herbivorous dinosaurs played a major role in shaping vegetation. Their feeding habits influenced plant distribution and community structure, while their movement redistributed seeds and nutrients. Large herbivores modified landscapes, creating open spaces and trails that affected other animals. Predatory dinosaurs, in turn, regulated herbivore populations, maintaining balance within these ecosystems. Social behaviors, such as herding or hunting in packs, further shaped interactions among species. These ecological relationships illustrate how life and environment were interdependent, evolving together through complex feedback loops. By the end of the Mesozoic, ecosystems were highly varied and productive. Forests of conifers, cycads, and flowering plants covered much of the land. Oceans teemed with reptiles, fish, and invertebrates. Dinosaurs dominated terrestrial landscapes, while early mammals and birds occupied more specialized niches. The combination of continental drift, climate zones, and ecological interactions created a world rich in diversity. The extinction events that closed this era reset ecological systems, opening pathways for mammals and modern plant groups to flourish. The Mesozoic era stands as a time of dynamic evolution, ecological complexity, and profound change, leaving a lasting imprint on Earth's biological history. After the end of the Mesozoic, roughly 66 million years ago, Earth entered the Cenozoic era, a period marked by the rise of mammals and eventually humans. The extinction of non-avian dinosaurs opened ecological niches across land, sea, and air, allowing mammals to diversify and adapt in ways that had previously been impossible. Small, nocturnal creatures that survived the mass extinction began to evolve into larger and more specialized forms. Some developed long limbs for running. Others grew powerful jaws or specialized teeth for chewing plants, and some adapted to hunting with speed and agility. Over millions of years, mammals spread across continents, filling roles once occupied by dinosaurs and establishing themselves as the dominant terrestrial vertebrates. Mammalian evolution produced a remarkable variety of forms. Ungulates grazed on expanding grasslands, while carnivores hunted herbivores across plains and forests. Arboreal mammals explored trees, developing adaptations for climbing and leaping. Aquatic mammals returned to the seas, evolving streamlined bodies for swimming and diving. Birds, insects, and other animals continued to diversify alongside mammals, creating complex ecosystems in forests, grasslands, mountains, and wetlands. Each habitat presented unique challenges, and life responded with new adaptations, demonstrating the flexibility and resilience of mammalian lineages throughout the Cenozoic. Ice ages and glacial cycles began to shape Earth's climate around 2.5 million years ago. Continental glaciers advanced and retreated repeatedly, altering sea levels, weather patterns, and habitats. Large ice sheets covered northern continents during glacial maxima, while warmer interglacial periods allowed forests, grasslands, and wetlands to expand. These cycles created pressures that influenced migration, survival, and adaptation. Species that could cope with changing temperatures, shifting vegetation, and seasonal fluctuations thrived, while others went extinct. The repeated advances and retreats of ice reshaped continents, rivers, and coastlines, leaving a lasting mark on the landscape. Human evolution took place within this dynamic environment. Early hominins appeared in Africa, with Australopithecus species walking upright while retaining features suited for climbing. Over millions of years, these early ancestors gave rise to the genus Homo. Homo habilis developed simple tools, enabling more efficient access to food and resources. Homo erectus expanded across continents, using fire and more complex tools to survive in varied climates. Eventually, Homo sapiens emerged, capable of abstract thought, language, and cultural innovation. This evolutionary journey reflects how environmental pressures and adaptive responses shaped humans alongside other species. Cultural development among humans profoundly affected the planet, Early humans learned to control fire, construct shelters, and hunt cooperatively, increasing survival and reproductive success. Agriculture transformed landscapes, allowing communities to settle and sustain larger populations. The domestication of animals and cultivation of crops altered ecosystems, while the expansion of human populations spread new species and altered natural habitats. Technology, from simple tools to complex machines, amplified human influence, reshaping rivers, forests, and coastlines. Cultural evolution became intertwined with biological evolution, as humans modified both their environment and their own societies to thrive in diverse conditions. The Cenozoic also saw the rise of large mammals, many of which became adapted to cold climates during glacial periods. Mammoths, mastodons, and giant ground sloths occupied Ice Age landscapes, while smaller mammals sought shelter in forests or burrows. Predators such as saber-toothed cats and dire wolves hunted these herbivores, maintaining balance in ecosystems. When glaciers retreated, habitats shifted, and many large mammals could not adapt quickly enough, leading to extinctions that reshaped terrestrial communities. These changes influenced plant growth, nutrient cycling, and predator-prey relationships, demonstrating how climate and ice age cycles drove evolutionary outcomes. Human migration and adaptation continued alongside these environmental changes. Groups spread out of Africa, encountering new climates, landscapes, and resources. They adapted culturally and biologically, developing clothing, shelter, and social strategies to survive. Knowledge of fire, food preparation, and tool-making enabled humans to inhabit regions with harsh winters or scarce resources. These adaptations illustrate how humans combined intelligence, cooperation, and innovation to respond to environmental pressures. Over time, human populations expanded across continents, establishing settlements and interacting with other species in ways that increasingly altered ecosystems. The interaction between humans and climate intensified as societies developed agriculture and animal husbandry. Clearing forests for fields changed local hydrology, soil composition, and vegetation patterns. Irrigation and land modification transformed deserts, wetlands, and river valleys. Human activity also affected wildlife, leading to declines or extinctions of some species while promoting others. As human populations grew, the global distribution of plants and animals shifted, reflecting the increasing influence of culture and technology on Earth systems. The Cenozoic demonstrates the growing interplay between biology, environment, and human activity over millions of years. Modern climate reflects both natural cycles and human influence. Atmospheric carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases have fluctuated over geological time, shaped by volcanic activity, weathering, ocean circulation, and ice ages. In the last few centuries, however, humans have become a dominant factor, releasing large amounts of carbon, changing land cover, and altering ecosystems at a global scale. Ice sheets in Greenland and Antarctica are responding to warming temperatures, and glaciers are retreating worldwide. Sea levels are rising, weather patterns are shifting, and habitats are changing rapidly. These conditions echo past climatic upheavals, but the speed and scale of change are unprecedented in Earth's history. The Cenozoic era, extending to the present, illustrates the resilience and adaptability of life. Mammals radiated into countless forms, ice ages shaped evolution and migration, and humans emerged as a species capable of profound environmental influence. Biological, geological, and cultural processes interacted continuously, creating a complex, interconnected world. From the first post-dinosaur mammals to modern human societies, life has responded to climate, tectonics, and ecological pressures, leaving a record in fossils, sediments, and living ecosystems. The story of the Cenozoic is the story of life's capacity to endure, adapt, and transform the planet in concert with environmental forces. From a cosmic perspective, Earth is a small, fragile sphere orbiting a medium-sized star in a vast galaxy. The planet's history, recorded in rocks, ice, and fossils, tells the story of resilience and change over billions of years. Earth's position in the solar system allows liquid water to exist, supports an atmosphere that protects life, and provides stable temperatures suitable for complex ecosystems. While the solar system has billions of stars and planets, Earth remains unique in the ways its geological, chemical, and biological systems interact to sustain life. Looking outward, the vast distances and inhospitable conditions elsewhere emphasize the rarity and preciousness of the environment we inhabit. The planet's geological systems have played a key role in maintaining habitability. Plate tectonics continuously recycle the crust, forming mountains, ocean basins, and volcanic activity that release gases into the atmosphere. Mountains erode slowly, feeding nutrients into rivers and oceans, sustaining life. Earth's magnetic field, generated by the movement of molten iron in its core, shields the surface from harmful solar and cosmic radiation, preserving the atmosphere from erosion by charged particles. Volcanism, earthquakes, and erosion are not mere destructive forces. They regulate carbon cycles, replenish nutrients, and influence climate patterns over millions of years. These processes have created a balance, allowing life to evolve in a stable yet dynamic environment. Earth's atmosphere, a mixture of nitrogen, oxygen, and trace gases, has evolved over time in response to life and geology. Oxygen accumulation, weathering of rocks, volcanic outgassing, and ocean chemistry have maintained chemical equilibrium that supports complex organisms. The atmosphere regulates temperature through greenhouse gases, distributes heat around the planet, and sustains the water cycle. Clouds, precipitation, winds, and ocean-atmosphere interactions create conditions that allow ecosystems to flourish on land and in water. Without this thin envelope of gases, life as we know it could not survive. Its stability is a testament to the interactions between Earth's interior, surface, oceans, and biosphere. The evolution of Earth's systems is tied to the Sun's long-term behavior. Over billions of years, solar luminosity has increased slowly, gradually altering temperatures and influencing climate. Plate tectonics, ocean currents, and ice sheets respond to these changes, redistributing heat and maintaining habitability. Life has adapted repeatedly to these gradual shifts, while sudden events, such as asteroid impacts or volcanic eruptions, have prompted rapid responses. Understanding these interactions emphasizes the delicate balance between planetary processes and cosmic forces. Earth is not isolated. Its systems are interwoven with the solar system's dynamics, demonstrating how even small variations in solar output can affect life globally. The planet's long-term future depends on multiple interacting factors. Geological processes will continue, slowly reshaping continents, building mountains, and eroding landscapes. The sun will gradually brighten over billions of years, increasing temperatures and altering atmospheric chemistry. Ice sheets and oceans will respond, ecosystems will shift, and species will need to adapt or face extinction. Plate tectonics may eventually slow, changing heat distribution and volcanic activity. Magnetic field strength may fluctuate, affecting radiation shielding. These slow, inevitable processes illustrate both the resilience and vulnerability of Earth, showing that while the planet endures, the conditions that allow life to thrive are not permanent without careful balance. Humans now occupy a central role in influencing these natural systems. Our species has developed technologies that alter climate, ecosystems, and geological processes at unprecedented speed. Deforestation, agriculture, urban expansion, and greenhouse gas emissions have changed landscapes and atmospheric composition in ways that rival natural forces. Resource extraction affects river systems, oceans, and soil fertility. The rate of change is faster than many species can adapt to, raising questions about sustainability. Understanding Earth's history provides perspective. Life has survived dramatic shifts before, but human actions introduce new pressures that require thoughtful stewardship to avoid long-term damage. Stewardship of Earth is both a responsibility and an opportunity. By observing and learning from the planet's geological and biological systems, humans can manage resources, protect biodiversity, and mitigate climate change. Conservation efforts, sustainable energy, and environmental policies aim to balance human needs with planetary health. Awareness of interconnections, how water cycles, atmospheric chemistry, and ecosystems influence each other, guides actions that preserve resilience. The same forces that allowed life to flourish over billions of years continue to operate, but they are now influenced by conscious decisions. Stewardship is a form of cooperation with the planet, respecting processes that have maintained equilibrium over immense timescales. Earth's fragility is evident in the speed at which ecosystems can be altered. Small changes in temperature, ocean acidity, or atmospheric composition can have cascading effects on species and habitats. Ice sheets may melt, coastlines may shift, and ocean currents may alter climate patterns. The history of mass extinctions reminds us that life is sensitive to sudden disruptions, whether natural or human-induced. Yet Earth has demonstrated resilience repeatedly, recovering from ice ages, asteroid impacts, and volcanic catastrophes. This dual nature, resilience paired with vulnerability, defines our understanding of the planet and highlights the importance of careful, informed actions to sustain it. Observing Earth from a cosmic vantage point reinforces its uniqueness. From orbit, the planet appears as a small blue sphere, its oceans glinting and continents outlined in green and brown. Clouds swirl above, reflecting sunlight, while storms travel across oceans and lands. This view emphasizes both scale and isolation. The planet exists within a vast, seemingly infinite universe, yet it harbors the only known life. Geological records, ice cores, and sedimentary layers tell a story of billions of years, revealing a planet shaped by forces both immense and subtle. Life has endured, adapted, and transformed the world, yet it remains dependent on conditions that can be disrupted by external or internal changes. Understanding Earth's systems requires integrating knowledge from geology, biology, chemistry, and physics. Plate movements, volcanic activity, magnetic field dynamics, atmospheric cycles, ocean currents, and solar input all interact to sustain life. Evolutionary processes and ecological interactions are interwoven with these physical systems. The long-term survival of species, including humans, depends on recognizing these connections and anticipating consequences of rapid changes. Science provides a framework to comprehend the planet's history, its present conditions, and its likely future, highlighting the importance of observation, study, and informed intervention. The human role in shaping Earth introduces a new chapter in the planet's story. Technology enables the modification of landscapes, oceans, and the atmosphere. Energy consumption, industrial activity, and global trade influence climate and biodiversity. Urbanization alters hydrology and soil composition. Agriculture transforms large tracts of land. The scale of human impact rivals that of natural forces that shaped Earth over millions of years. Yet this also presents an opportunity. Humans can choose to mitigate damage, restore ecosystems, and reduce the rate of harmful change, applying knowledge of Earth's processes to ensure continued habitability. Reflection on Earth's resilience offers both reassurance and caution. The planet has survived enormous changes, including ice ages, asteroid impacts, and mass extinctions. Life has rebounded repeatedly, demonstrating adaptability and persistence. Yet modern pressures operate on timescales much shorter than the forces that previously guided adaptation. Ecosystems may collapse if changes outpace the ability of species to respond. Climate shifts, habitat loss, and pollution test the balance that has been maintained over billions of years. Awareness of both resilience and fragility underscores the need for thoughtful interaction with Earth systems, balancing human activity with the natural processes that sustain life. In the cosmic context, Earth is a laboratory of life, a record of geological, chemical, and biological interactions. The planet continues to evolve, driven by tectonic movements, atmospheric dynamics, ocean currents, and solar input. Humans are now participants in this evolution, capable of altering the planet on global scales. Understanding the past provides insight into future possibilities, showing how life and environment are intertwined. The record of resilience and adaptation offers lessons on sustaining ecosystems and navigating change, emphasizing that the survival of species, including humans, depends on cooperation with natural processes rather than domination over them. Looking ahead, Earth will continue to change. Glacial cycles, tectonic shifts, volcanic activity, and gradual changes in solar output will shape climate and landscapes. Human influence will continue to affect the rate and scale of these changes. Choices in energy, land use, conservation, and technology will determine the health of ecosystems, the persistence of species, and the stability of climate. Recognizing the interconnectedness of all Earth systems encourages decisions that maintain balance. Stewardship is a form of respect for the geological, chemical, and biological processes that have made life possible, ensuring that the planet remains habitable for generations to come. Ultimately, Earth's story is one of interplay between forces immense and delicate, between stability and change. From its formation to the present day, the planet has been shaped by internal dynamics and external influences, hosting life that has adapted to each transformation. Humans now hold the responsibility of understanding and preserving this balance. Reflection on the Earth's resilience and fragility, its geological past, and its cosmic context provides perspective on the challenges and opportunities ahead. The planet's future will depend on our ability to harmonize with its systems, to respect its limits, and to nurture the life that has flourished for billions of years. Earth remains both resilient and vulnerable, a reminder of the interconnectedness of all natural systems and the profound responsibility of those who inhabit it.